So today in Growing Places, we're going to be talking about why you can't grow pigs on Mars, how to make tempeh, and the future of plant-based proteins. Our guest today is a true pioneer of this industry. Joining us on Growing Places is Seth Tibbott, who is the founder of Tofurky.
Hey, Nate. Thanks for having me.
So perhaps you have heard of Tofurky already. My guess is you've probably even seen them in your supermarket. Seth Tibbott actually founded Tofurky in 1980, making tempeh in his local food co-op while living in a barn near Portland in Oregon. A couple of years later, he would upgrade his tempeh factory into an abandoned schoolhouse in southern Washington, where he would live for the next 7 years. By the time that brands like Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods came onto the scene, Seth Tibbott had already sold millions of serves of his plant-based turkey substitutes. So before we dive in and kind of start talking about the future and the outlook for the plant-based protein market, I wanted to just kind of catch up on the story, to date. Plant-based proteins is obviously a part of this industry where there's been a huge amount of growth over the last few years, but correct me if I'm wrong, and if my math is correct, you actually started working on the business that is now Tofurky before a lot of the founders who are working in this space today were even born. Is that correct? And if so, what was it that you saw all those years ago that others were missing?
First of all, oh my God, I think you're right. You never think you're going to be this old. Like I'm going to be 70 on Wednesday, but voila, here I am. And when I first started experimenting with vegetarian diets and then started the Tofurky company, I think that the biggest thing that people were missing was that there was real inefficiency about how protein was being produced when it was coming from animals. You had these animals where you were pouring in up to 15, 16 pounds of grains and then harvesting protein that would maybe give you 1 pound of protein. So, it's anywhere from a 5-to-1 to 16-to-1 ratio, which is a terrible waste of grains. And it just made real sense to me to why don't we just start feeding these grains to people? And that was first brought to my attention by reading the book Diet for a Small Planet. Francis Moore Lappé was pointing out how inefficient this protein was. So I started experimenting with soybeans. I was making these soy burgers, which were kind of, to be honest, not so good to taste, but they digested worse. I was just mashing up cooked soybeans and putting wheat in there to hold it together. And then I found tempeh in 1975 while I was visiting the farm, which was a commune of 1,200 pure vegetarian hippies. Pure vegetarian was the word for vegan at that time. And that's where I learned about tempeh. And when I made my first batch of tempeh, I was like, this is it. This is the great tasting bean that we have. And it's really an efficient protein too. So I want to bring this low on the food chain protein to the world. And that was really my aha moment.
So, it sounds like a very logical argument based around sort of resource efficiency. I gather it wasn't kind of then and there that this idea took off. And, there might have been a lot of doubters or haters back in the early days. Can you talk more about some of the criticism and perhaps the pushback that you received when you were just starting out?
One of the classic critiques that I got was from my Aunt Rosie in December 1st, 1980. I put in my application with the Secretary of State of Oregon to start Turtle Island Foods was the name of the company from the start. And I was so excited, and I went out to her house at Christmas and I told her my whole business plan, and she just listened to me. And then at one point, she just said, stop, Seth. This is a terrible idea. This is a
Wow.
meat eating country, and it's always going to be a meat eating country. Nobody is going to want to eat soybeans, let alone moldy one. It was a very esoteric product at that time, and to a
Yeah.
degree still is. The plant based food section of the grocery store was non existent. No plant based milks, no plant based cheese, yogurt, meats, any of that. So that was really where it was at in 1980.
I see. And I mean, despite Aunt Rosie's critique, you obviously, were committed enough to this idea to persist with it. How did you kind of have the perseverance to push through that when all these people were telling you it was a terrible idea?
At the time, the last 8 years before I opened the company, I was a teacher naturalist. And I was really concerned about the environment and how we could take care of the planet. And that's what really kept me going because, you know, Aunt Rosie wasn't totally wrong. Like for the first 10 years, I made a total of $31,000. So the
My
first
goodness.
9 or 10 years, I was sort of failing as a business. Even though the money wasn't there, what was there was this mission. And, I think that that's the superpower of a lot of the vegan startups that we're seeing today and the plant-based
Mm.
startups is every business from these big Beyond Meat and Impossible Burgers all the way down to the man or woman that's selling their little granola or cookies at the farm stand. They all have the mission. In business, the most important thing is keeping going, turning that key every morning and learning something new every day.
Mm.
And the longer you stay in business, the less stupid you become. And mission will keep you going even
Yeah.
when the money isn't there. So I think it's the sense of mission that's really important in business.
I hear you. Well, hats off to you for the persistence. I certainly feel we can all learn something from that. I love it. So Seth, back in the day, I mean, veganism and vegetarian, it was kind of associated with, tree-loving hippies. Today, I feel like it's, becoming much more of a mainstream sort of movement. And I was curious if you could talk a little bit about how your customer demographic might have changed or evolved over the years and decades.
In the 1980s, it was really you were a vegetarian or you were a carnivore, and there weren't really these shades of gray. It was kind of like one or the other. And so we were really targeting vegetarians. There wasn't this
Mm.
flexitarian market that you see today that's really driving a lot of the change, and a lot of these plant-based foods are people that eat both meat and plant-based proteins, and that is an emerged market. I mean, there probably were people, they just weren't categorized or named yet, but it was really and even in vegetarian, there wasn't this vegan vegetarian split. I mean, the farm called themselves pure vegetarians,
Mhm.
as opposed to vegetarians, pure vegetarians, not eating dairy or cheese or milk. And so I think that now what's really changed the most is the rise and the marketing attention that's being given to the flexitarian,
Mhm.
who many of whom were at one time vegetarians, and then for one reason or another went back and they're eating little fish, little chicken, but they didn't go all the way back to meat and
Mhm.
potatoes every meal. So the segment and market now is what's really different.
Well, Seth, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on Growing Places today. Thank you for sharing all your wisdom and perspective from so many years spent chipping away and working on things in this industry. On behalf of the whole community, I wanted to say thank you for doing what you're doing, and thank you for having the persistence and perseverance to stick with this, despite the haters and the doubters you might have encountered along the way. The world is certainly a better place from having folks like you, diligently working away on this sort of thing. So we sincerely appreciate your efforts. Wish you the best of luck, and we will catch you again next time.
Well, the same to you, Nate. It's a better place for you. And thank you for what you do. And thanks for having me on. And it was a pleasure.